If you want to know what America's $30.6 trillion economy looks like, look at the RVs popping up in parking lots every place. Not luxury RVs for vacations, but the makeshift roofs of hundreds of thousands of Americans falling through the safety net of the world's richest economy. While economic indicators are constantly touted, GDP is growing, the labor market is still strong, and Wall Street is experiencing its best days. A completely different America is emerging just outside the fringes of the glamorous neighborhoods. An America where families who once had stable incomes are now crammed into old RVs, living off Walmart parking lots, gas stations, or vacant lots temporarily permitted by the government. This is no longer a story about homelessness. This is the story of a disappearing class, and about how America is trying to hide that truth, one RV at a time. In today's video, we're going to pull back that curtain so you can see what America is trying to hide. A new generation of hidden homeless people. People who once worked, paid taxes, and strive for the American dream, but are now living on the margins, right in the country they put their faith in. Watch until the end. Because what is about to be revealed might make you unable to see America the same way you did before. In the eyes of the world, America has long been framed as a perfect combo package. The #1 economic superpower, the largest innovation hub on the planet, where Hollywood shines, Silicon Valley shapes the future, and Wall Street controls the global financial pulse. International economic reports consistently reinforce this. In 2025, the US recorded a GDP of over $30.6 trillion, a figure that many countries would take a century to approach. All those images create the impression that America is a society where success is always within reach and people's lives must be fulfilling. External evaluations also say the same. According to the Pew Research Center, 69% of people in other countries view the United States favorably, demonstrating the enduring appeal of this superpower's image. But by 2025, the picture began to change. Favorable ratings dropped sharply in 15 out of the 24 countries surveyed. Canada alone fell from 54% to 34%. That was one of the first signs that the shiny exterior was cracking, not just in the eyes of the world, but also in the perception of the American people themselves. This is because the reality in the US is also changing in a similar way. Another survey shows that only 36% of Americans believe their children will live better than their generation, the lowest level in decades. For many older Americans, this is no longer a mere statistic, but a reality that makes them feel uneasy. The prosperity they once experienced is gradually becoming something that cannot be guaranteed for future generations. Just like Hollywood films use fake backdrops, the perfect image of America is also built on cardboard walls that have been heavily filtered and edited, making it difficult for anyone to see the truth from a distance. Because hidden behind that layer of prosperity is a group of people who rarely appear in official reports. Those who once believed in the American dream, worked hard, and had stable incomes, but are now hidden homeless. They don't sleep on the sidewalk, and they're not included in the statistics either. However, they no longer have a proper place to live. They are factory workers, truck drivers, office employees, technicians, the professions that once ensured the lives of the post-World War II middle class. However, in the current situation, these jobs are no longer enough to cover basic living expenses. The remnants of the American dream are therefore gradually disappearing. It didn't disappear overnight, but receded step by step, until those who were once the backbone of society realized they had slipped into the shadows, where they were hidden from the view of both the media and government statistics. When a society has to hide the people who were once the backbone of the middle class, we begin to understand that the perfection America presents doesn't tell the whole story. And what lies beneath that veneer of glamour, what hasn't been said, will begin to emerge in the next installment. When you watch Hollywood blockbusters or search for information about the United States online, The image that always appears is of a prosperous nation. Brightly lit cities, a comfortable middle class, and even in movies, low-income workers live no differently than the well-off in many major Asian cities. But that's just a carefully selected bright side. The media often only presents the most beautiful images, while the less appealing picture, especially the homelessness crisis, rarely appears in stories about the American dream. This is a paradox that's hard to ignore. An economy worth $30.6 trillion isn't enough to keep a roof over the heads of hundreds of thousands of workers, yet it's enough to make them disappear from the statistics. According to the latest report, over 771,000 people are homeless, which is equivalent to 23 people per 10,000 residents. What's more noteworthy is the speed. The number of homeless people has increased for 2 consecutive years, and in 2024 alone, it increased by 18%, the highest increase in the entire history of HUD statistics. A nation richer than ever, but also a time when more people are homeless than ever. The concentration of the crisis in California is the clearest evidence. This is the wealthiest state in the United States, the 5th largest economy in the world if separated. Yet it accounts for nearly a quarter of the nation's total homeless population, with over 180,000 people. Additionally, inland states like Arizona, Colorado, Ohio, and Oregon also saw significant increases, indicating that this has become a nationwide issue, not just a local phenomenon in coastal cities. What's more concerning is the gap between official figures and the reality on the streets. Reports from many major cities like Los Angeles, Las Vegas, or Denver often show improved or alleviated figures. But when observing reality, many American residents see the number of tents, temporary RVs, and people sleeping in cars increasing every week. Why is that? It's simple. The main problem lies in the statistical method. The US point-in-time count system only counts on a single night in January, and only counts people who are in shelters or sleeping outdoors at that exact moment. Hundreds of thousands of people live in motels, garages, couch surf, or RVs, so they are excluded from the count. They become a hidden homeless population, existing in the grey area of the system, receiving no assistance, and also being invisible to society. It's not hard to understand why many citizens sarcastically say that the United States is hiding the homeless to preserve its image of prosperity. The disparity between the richest nation on earth and the nation with the fastest growing homeless population raises serious questions about the current development model. A model that is creating an ever-widening social gap and pushing the middle class, once the backbone of America, out of their comfort zone. If you want to know where America has hidden this hidden homeless group, the answer lies right within America's strangest shelter models, places where, just by looking at them, you'd find it hard to believe that people have had to live like this right in the heart of a superpower. When we think of the homeless, most of us usually picture people sleeping on sidewalks, under bridges, or in makeshift tents. But in America, there exists a completely different group. They still go to work, still take their children to school, and still appear in supermarkets or gas stations like ordinary residents. There's only one difference. They no longer have a real home to return to. This is the group of hidden homeless, those who live in forms of shelter that society rarely considers. The US doesn't have Korean-style small compartments, but it does have one of the world's largest informal shelter ecosystems. Weekly motels, makeshift converted garages, outdated RVs parked along highways, parking lots turned into overnight cities, or abandoned warehouses partitioned into bedrooms. These forms of shelter are not an unusual phenomenon, but rather a direct result of rental prices far exceeding the affordability of millions of older workers. Just one event, such as a rent increase, illness, or reduced working hours, can immediately make them unable to maintain traditional housing. The renovated garage is a clear example. In many cities in California, families have to pay up to $800 a month for an old garage that has been converted into a bedroom. No windows, no insulation, no safety guarantees. But it's still the last resort when rent exceeds actual income. Space that was originally intended for vehicles, in this situation, has become a survival option. Weekly motels are also a refuge for tens of thousands of people. There's no kitchen, no living room, and the cost is higher than long-term rent if calculated monthly. But for many, a motel is still a less risky option than living outdoors. Therefore, motels have become a form of expensive but poor housing, a paradox of the current American housing system. The story of RV life shows a more pronounced downward trend. Once a symbol of the free and adventurous American lifestyle, RVs are now becoming a mandatory residence for those with no other options. Instead of traveling across states, they live permanently in old RVs, parked in Walmart lots, along highways, or on empty land. RVs no longer signify freedom, but have become an empty life raft for those pushed out of the housing market. All these phenomena reflect a clear reality. America doesn't lack housing. America lacks housing that workers can afford to rent. There are still many vacant apartments, but the high rental prices and financial requirements make them inaccessible to middle-income earners. And the truth is even darker than what lies above ground. In some cities, the most desperate people have to live in the sewer system, where every rainstorm can wash away all their belongings and threaten their lives. Others took shelter under the overpass, where there was only enough room for one person lying on their side, turning the narrow concrete gaps into overnight sleeping places. These are forms of residency that few would imagine an American citizen would have to go through. From dimly lit motels to sweltering garages, from dilapidated RVs to underground tunnels, this entire network of shelters reveals that the homeless in America are not only pushed out of the center, but are driven into the cracks that society doesn't want to see. And even more concerning, life in these places doesn't help them save money or restore stability. It just pushes them from one crisis to another. What created such a closed loop that once you fall into it, there's almost no chance of getting back on the ground? The answer is in the next section. In the current context of the United States, losing one's home is not just a personal event. For hundreds of thousands of workers, it's often the starting point of a cycle of decline from which they can barely escape. That cycle began very quietly. When they lost their homes, they also lost their residential addresses. And in America, an address is not just a place to return to, but almost a kind of social passport. Most companies, whether large or small, require a fixed address for receiving applications. Without an address, job opportunities are significantly reduced. Losing a job opportunity means losing a stable income, and without income, renting a house becomes impossible. That vortex pushed them further down into RVs, makeshift motels, or the streets, where they were seen as invisible within the system. The elderly are the most severely affected. Many businesses are hesitant to accept applicants without an address, and at the same time, they view older age as a risk in hiring. For those over 50, a prolonged period of unemployment can become the end for their ability to re-enter the labour market. It's not that they don't want to work. They were simply locked out of the system. No address to apply for jobs, no work to earn income, and no income to find housing again. With each passing loop, the opportunity to return to a normal life gradually diminishes. This situation is exacerbated by the fact that the United States is short over 7 million affordable homes. This caused rental prices to skyrocket, while financial documentation requirements became increasingly stringent. Someone who has fallen out of a stable orbit will face a series of barriers. Credit score requirements, income requirements 3 times the rent, good rental history requirements. all of which are disadvantageous for those who have experienced an economic shock. Under those conditions, a residential address is not just a place to live, but becomes a measure by which society decides who still has the opportunity to participate in the labour market and who is excluded from the game. Looking at this cycle, it becomes clear that homelessness in America is not just a personal problem or the result of bad choices. It reflects a deeper reality. America's socio-economic system lacks the ability to absorb shocks and lacks safety nets for older workers. When a major economy like the US still allows hundreds of thousands of people to fall into this inescapable spiral, it's a sign that the instability lies within the very structure of the system. In the next part, this spiral will be turned another layer. America spends billions of dollars building shelters, but why do so many people still refuse to enter? Over the years, federal and state governments have spent billions of dollars on the shelter system, hoping it would be a quick and direct solution to reduce the number of people sleeping on the streets. However, the paradox lies in the fact that despite the budget increasing steadily each year, many homeless people still choose to live in RVs or outdoors rather than enter shelters. This is confusing for those looking at the issue from the outside, but it's an understandable reaction when you look at how shelters actually operate. For most homeless people, shelters are considered unsafe environments. Many people have experienced theft, conflict, or harassment while sharing crowded spaces. Some shelters have very strict curfews, making it impossible for night shift workers to keep their jobs if they stay there. People with mild mental health issues or anxiety also find it difficult in environments with too many strangers, noise, and a lack of privacy. Therefore, choosing to live in an RV, even if it's cramped, became a more controlled option. They locked the doors, had private space, and felt safer than sleeping among dozens of strangers. These limitations make shelters a last resort rather than an ideal refuge. Despite being designed with humanitarian goals in mind, many shelters lack the basic conditions that homeless people need to rebuild their lives. Quiet space, a low-conflict environment, the ability to maintain employment, and a sense of privacy. This inadvertently leads shelters to only address the surface, reducing the number of tents in sight, without creating a sustainable foundation for those trying to escape homelessness. And that's why, despite the US pouring billions of dollars into the shelter system, the homelessness crisis hasn't decreased. Because the core question isn't how many shelters to build, but rather whether the system truly helps someone escape the cycle of homelessness, or is merely keeping them temporarily in a different state. This story raises a larger issue. If short-term support options are ineffective, what in the policy is preventing people from improving their lives? In recent years, the federal government has announced numerous plans to reduce homelessness, including the All-In program, which aims to decrease the national homeless population by 25%. However, the actual data went in the opposite direction. The number of people losing their homes increased the fastest in decades. This reveals a more concerning issue than the statistics. Policy is diverging from reality, and solutions on paper are not keeping pace with the decline in people's living conditions. That phase difference is evident in many localities. Instead of investing in affordable housing or long-term stability support, some governments prioritize clearing tent encampments and criminalizing outdoor sleeping. Clearance campaigns are conducted regularly, but they only cause the homeless to move constantly, lose community connections, and find it difficult to keep temporary jobs if they still have them. Moving them from one area to another doesn't reduce the number of homeless people. It only makes the problem less visible in the short term. Simultaneously, the financial foundation of the middle class, particularly the elderly, is being eroded by a series of factors. Soaring house prices, rising property taxes, expensive healthcare costs, persistent inflation, and wages that haven't kept pace with the actual cost of living. For those over 50, just one event like job loss, illness, or a rent increase can completely eliminate their ability to maintain their housing. They are the group hardest hit by this crisis, yet they receive the least support because most current programs are designed for younger groups or those with specific eligibility requirements. The combination of ineffective policies, rising living costs, and inadequate support mechanisms leads to an increasingly clear observation. People are not getting poorer due to personal choices, but because the current structure makes it harder than ever to maintain a basic standard of living. And as more and more people feel marginalized like this, the crisis goes beyond homelessness. It becomes an indicator of a system that is losing its ability to keep its citizens safe. As of now, the United States stands at a crossroads. One approach is to continue maintaining the clean image of cities by clearing encampments, controlling RVs, and pushing homeless people out of visible spaces. This is the approach many localities have chosen, not because they want to completely hide it, but because it produces visible results. However, this approach did not reduce the number of homeless people, but only shifted them to less visible areas. The remaining path is to directly address the issue through long-term models, particularly Housing First, a program that has proven effective with veterans for over a decade. Housing First provides stable housing first, followed by the implementation of employment and mental health support services. When people have a safe place to return to, their ability to re-enter the labour market and rebuild their lives is much higher than when they are living in temporary shelters or on the streets. This model shows that the homelessness crisis can be controlled if policies focus on the root causes rather than just treating the symptoms. RV homelessness thus becomes a mirror that accurately reflects the flaws of the system. It shows that the cost of living has far outstripped the incomes of older working-class people. There is a severe shortage of affordable housing. Federal and local policies are not aligned. And the middle class, once the stable backbone of America, no longer has a strong enough buffer to withstand economic shocks. When old RVs become a more popular housing option, it's a sign that the problem is no longer confined to a small group, but has spread to the core of society. A better future is entirely achievable if America accepts that homelessness is not an individual problem. It is the ultimate test of an economy's ability to protect its people after reaching its limits of development. Solutions such as building more affordable housing, relaxing rental requirements, improving healthcare and employment support, or piloting community housing models are all viable options, but only effective when implemented based on reality and maintained stably for many years. Will policymakers dare to shift their focus away from the keep the surface tidy model toward longer-term and more expensive solutions that could actually reduce homelessness? Or will RVs continue to be a permanent symbol of an America that is losing its ability to protect the very people who contributed to its prosperity? The answer is not yet clear, but this choice will determine America for the next decade and decide whether this crisis will be resolved or simply continue to be hidden in silence. The homelessness crisis in the US didn't erupt overnight, and it won't disappear with a single policy either. The dilapidated RVs sitting still in the darkness are not only temporary homes for hundreds of thousands of people, but also a reminder that something is shifting deep within the fabric of American society. Something that data, reports, or political speeches sometimes fail to fully convey. If America wants to enter a new period of stability, the question is no longer, how do we clean up the streets? But rather, how do we keep people? Because a superpower is not measured by the number of skyscrapers or GDP growth rate, but by its ability to protect those on the brink of instability. And when you look at the RVs lined up overnight, perhaps the most thought-provoking thing isn't how they're living, but why a wealthy country like America allowed them to fall into that situation in the first place. If the American dream once lifted millions, why are so many people falling out of it today? And if we keep looking the other way, is the future of our own children and grandchildren becoming more fragile? If today's story sparks a thought, memory, or personal experience for you, please leave a comment. And if you want more people to see this part of the truth, please like, share the video, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next topics. Your support helps us continue to produce independent and neutral analytical content like this. This video is based on public data, government reports, and independent research sources. The purpose of the content is not to criticize any individual, organization, or government, but rather to analyze social phenomena and open up constructive discussions. The statements in the video are general and do not represent the views of any official agency or organization.